Setting up daily schedule. Go to Scheduling and Attendance. Click on Clocking Schedule. Right-click to add a new clocking schedule. Enter the schedule ID and the name of the schedule according to your preference. Next, select the work schedule as weekly. Enter the description if there's any. Click OK to proceed to the configuration of the clocking schedule. Key in the working hours of the company for all the days. For example, in time is 6 a.m., break time is 10 a.m. Resume time is 11 a.m. and out time is 3 p.m. You can round up, down or round to midpoint for each column according to your settings for easier calculation. You can also allow the grace period for the employees. For example, if you key in 15 minutes in the Allow Grace Period in Minutes column, anyone who clocks in 15 minutes later from the official in time, they will not be considered late in the attendance sheet. Flexible break time feature allows the company to set a certain duration allowed for breaks, for example 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. During this break duration, employees are free to take their break hour, but they have to be mindful of the preset limit set in this column. If the company set the break duration to 60 minutes only, an employee who takes break at 1 p.m. must be back by 2 p.m. and if they goes out at 2:30 p.m., they must be back by 3:30 p.m. Clocking Range tab. This part is recommended to be left as default. However, here is where you can define the maximum time that a particular clocking falls into the time slot. Daily clocking schedule could be used as schedules for rotational shifts. You can specify the qualified minutes before the shift starts. General tab. Here you can choose whether you want to consider the times that are recorded in OT and done columns to be considered as overtime or as normal working time. Click the appropriate radio button to determine your choice. If you want the employees to select the status key on the terminal to determine their clocking status, select the Enable or Disable Employee Define Interroute Records. Once this is selected, the system will disregard all settings done in the Clocking Schedule and Range tab and will follow the clocking status selected by the employees. Rounding tab. Rounding tab determines the rounding of minutes rules allowed in the clocking schedule, and the rules will determine the presentation of time in the attendance sheet. You can choose to round your total work hours as well as to round your overtime hours. You can also choose to round the in-time or out-time according to your preference. For example, any transaction between 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. will be rounded as 6:30 a.m. or any transaction between 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. will be rounded as 3:30 p.m. Break tab. You can determine the rules for break time allowed in the clocking schedule, and the rules will determine the presentation of time in the attendance sheet. The first option is to not deduct the lunch time if the employees works half day. If the employees is on half day work, and you do not want to deduct their break time, tick on the checker. You can add the remaining lunch or dinner time into the work time. This is to add the work time for the users who work during their lunch or dinner break. If this is applicable in your company, tick the checker to turn it on. If your company policy includes deducting extra minutes taken for break, tick the checker for do you want to deduct extra lunch or dinner time from working hour. If you want to include the unfinished break time into overtime hours, you may do so by taking the do you want to include lunch or dinner time into overtime hour checker. If you want to deduct the break time from overtime hour, if your overtime exceeds a certain time, define the number of hours that should be deducted if the overtime hour taken exceeds a certain value. Overtime tab. If your employees come early for work, for example they arrived at 8 a.m. and the official end time is 9 a.m., you can allow them to claim for overtime by selecting the option Early Time for Work Before in Time. If your company has different overtime rate for different sessions of overtime, you can define the in and out time for the distinct overtime session. You can define the minimum minutes required by the company for a staff to work before they qualify for an OT claim. You can also limit the maximum number of hours a staff can claim for overtime for each working day. by default this is set as 24 hours. There are cases where an employee has short time in their total work hour and they are working overtime. If the company wants to replace the short time on their total work hour from the OT taken, you may do so by taking the checker here. We are now done with setting up the daily clocking schedule. Click on Save button to save the settings.